Hey, I'm John. This is Underhill Creations and Casting Solutions, and I'm back in the shop today, and I'm going to be conducting a cast using these golf tees. So a friend of mine asked me to make him a blank so that they could turn a bowl that has golf tees embedded in it. But they wanted the plastic golf tees, so they want the color to show all the way through the tee and not like the painted wooden ones, so when you cut the wooden ones open, you just see wood. So in this case, we're going to have to go through a couple extra steps. Not a big deal. But I'm going to show you how I would cast golf tees in a blank of resin to be turned on the lathe. Here's how I do it. Alright, so for starters, you want to put some nitrile gloves on. And I use nitrile because they hold up a little better to the chemicals we're going to be using. So in this case, I'm going to take some denatured alcohol and I'm going to wash these golf tees. So my thought is this. During the manufacture process, there's probably some sort of an agent used to either coat these over the mold or after they're made so that they don't stick. So if you notice, these plastic ones are real shiny and smooth, pretty slippery. So I'm going to take a glass jar. I'm going to put maybe just a quarter, a third of the way full of some denatured alcohol. It doesn't have to be filled. I'm going to take my golf tees and I'm going to drop them in the alcohol. Now all I want to do is wash them. I don't want to use anything too harsh. If you don't have denatured alcohol and you decide to use acetone, I will say this, don't leave them in more than a few seconds because acetone will eat plastic. It melts it. The alcohol, not so much. So I'm going to shake them up like this, and all I want to do is create that swooshing of the alcohol around all of the golf tees, so if there's anything on them, it'll clean them off. And then I'm going to use a strainer, and this is a shop strainer that I use for a lot of my embedded object casts. And I'm just going to dump it in here, shake them off real good so that all the alcohol falls in the bucket, and put the golf tees out on the tray. Then what I can do is take this alcohol, dump it back in the glass, and reuse it for the next batch. I'll do this about 3 times until I have more than enough golf tees ready to cast, and then we'll move forward. So now that I've got them all washed, they're still a little wet. So what I'm going to do, it's a nice day outside, I'm going to take these outside, set them in the sunlight for a little while, and let all that alcohol evaporate off of them so that way I'm starting out with nice and dry golf tees. Alright, so while our golf tees are warming in the sun, our next process is to take a base, and this is just a 1/4 inch piece of plywood that I've used. I've already used it on a couple other bases, so it's already got tape on it, but basically you want to cover this with clear tape, and in this case I'm using U-line packing tape. It's the thicker tape. If it's too thin or too generic, it's not going to hold up to the heat, so you want something that isn't going to melt when the resin cures on it. And in this case, I know this tape has worked because I've used it on several projects. So next, the mold I'm using is a 3D printed cylinder. Now this is a 5-inch circle because that was what the request was. So what I have to do now is 2 options. If I want to reuse this, I need to coat the inside with tape. If I'm just going to let them turn this off, then it's okay to leave it as it is. But for the process of the demo, I'm going to cover the inside with tape, and to do that, you just basically stretch a piece out, take a razor blade, and cut it off. So I've got one piece of tape in there. It's a little hard to see because it's black, but you see I've got the one piece of tape in there, and this excess that's overhanging, I'm just going to take a razor blade and slide it along the edge, and it removes the excess tape. So I'm going to go ahead and line the entire inside of this, and when I get that done, we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so the inside is all covered with tape, and that's basically just so that the resin will demold from this. Now what we need to do is, I'm going to place a block in the center of my mold for a worm drive. To do this, I'm basically going to take some hot glue, put a couple of beads on here, and stick it in the center of my bottom. I just think that it will be more secure for someone to put a worm drive in this blank to turn it as opposed to relying on the resin to being stable enough. So next I'm going to take my cylinder and I'm going to place it over the top and I'm going to center this. It doesn't have to be exact, just close, because we've got a couple of inches of surface up there to fine tune it. So when you think you have it close, place it on top. I'm going to hold my hand on it and just work my way around it with a bead of hot glue. And I want the hot glue to just sit right in the corner where the wall meets the bottom. And this is going to serve two purposes. It's going to hold everything together so that it doesn't move. And it's also going to seal that bottom seam so that resin doesn't seep out of it. So I'm going to hold this just for maybe a minute, to allow that glue to set up so that nothing moves or lifts away, especially if the bottom isn't completely flat. Alright, so I've just brought the golf tees in from the sun. They're nice and warm. I've got my mold ready, so now we're just going to place the tees in the mold. I'm not going for any particular direction or pattern. I just want them random. I may shake it just a little bit to get them to settle in there a little tighter, but it just all comes down to whatever your goal for your end results are. And I'm going to leave them sticking out. That way I don't want it to encounter an area of resin after it's turned down where there isn't golf tees. So I'll just stick a few in there so that way they're protruding out in different directions. Alright, so I've got everything set up here. I've got my resin out. Now in this case we're using a two-part epoxy. This is a deep pour epoxy because of the depth of the mold. If you use something that isn't made for a deep pour, what's going to happen is as it cures, you're going to risk it having a thermal crack because it generates so much heat in the curing process it can't escape quick enough. So the deep pour stuff cures a little slower. Now, the reason we're using epoxy is because urethane resins and some objects like these plastic golf tees, as smooth as they are, sometimes you have a problem with things bonding to the resin. And in this case, the golf tees and the resin don't bond strongly, and after poured, you can actually pull the golf tees out of the urethane like I could in this previous cast. So in this case, we're going to use deep pour epoxy, and we've got everything ready in the mold except for one thing. I'm going to take a mesh and put over the top of it. Now in this case, this was a roll that I bought at Hobby Lobby, and what this is going to do is it's just going to keep the golf tees from floating out of the mold as I pour the resin in. That way everything stays down deep where I want it. And just going to put a couple of rubber bands over this in a few different directions just in case any of them break. There's another one to help hold. So, alright, now what we're going to do, we're going to set this aside. We're going to mix our epoxy. Now, epoxies can vary from urethane resins, where urethane resins have to be poured by weight. These epoxies, as it states on the label here, are poured by volume. So, something else I want you to make note of is sometimes when your resins are stored in a cool area, which preserves the freshness of the resin, as opposed to leaving it in direct sunlight or in a warm area where it may harden, sometimes it'll start to crystallize on you. And if that happens, which I noticed with this epoxy, it had some crystallization going on the bottom. So what you didn't see is I placed this in a bucket, and poured some really hot warm water, as hot as I could get it out of the tap, poured water around this container in the white bucket, and I changed that 3 or 4 different times every 30 minutes. And what that did is it allowed the crystallization to melt. It's kind of like honey. If you leave honey, it'll start to get those crystals on it. Epoxy resin can do the same thing. So a quick and easy way to fix that would be put it in a warm bath. If you were to use it before you broke down all that crystallization, it could affect how your molds cure. Your cast may be flexible, maybe not cure at all. So rather than risk all of that, you want to make sure that it's all broke down and mixed properly. All right, so this is a 2-to-1 mixture rate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 20 ounces. And I'm just looking at that mold, I'm looking at this, and I'm probably going to have more than what I need, but I need to use this resin up. So I put 20 ounces of the resin, and now I'm going to put 10 ounces of the catalyst here. There we go. And the nice thing about these painter cups, you can get them at Menards, is they've got an ounces on the side here, and it allows you to see exactly what you're doing. So normally I mix my resins in 2 separate cups by equal weight and then combine them so that I have time to get everything else ready. But there's such a long working time with this. This working time, I mean, it's saying 60 to 90 minutes working time. So the problem with that is it's going to need a full 5 to 7 days to cure, and it's going to have to be under pressure for about 72 hours. So we're going to get this mixed up. I'm going to use my drill and my spade bit. I'm just going to work the edges. Now if your resin were thicker, you can also place it in a warm bath to help it break down a little thinner so it mixes easier. Sometimes I'll just set it in sunlight also, and that kind of helps warm it up maybe an hour or 2 before I use it. It really all depends on the time of year. In the winter time when the shop's colder, my resin will get a little thicker. This time of year, it's been pretty nice out, been a little warm, so the resin's a little thinner. Alright, so as you can see, when the resin first comes together, it got a little foggy, a little cloudy. After you start mixing it, it'll start to get a little clear on you. So now what we're going to do, we're going to add some mica. Because I'm going to be stirring the mica up really aggressively in the resin as well, I'm not going to be as concerned about if there's a little bit of unmixed resin there, because I'm going to continue to mix this for a bit, but I want to take advantage of the color. So because we're using golf tees, I thought it would be only appropriate to make the resin green. So now if you're wondering how do you know how much mica to add, it really all just comes down to your preference. In this case, it'll be thick enough, it'll be consistent enough throughout the resin that it won't be real transparent, but you ought to be able to see the golf tees throughout it. So as you mix your micas, you may not always be happy with the color you're getting. So there's an option. And I always like to add a little bit of dye to my resin. In this case, we're using green dye, and that will basically darken the micas and give it something to work against. But green is one of those dyes that a little bit goes a long way, so start with a little bit and work your way up to it. Don't just pour a bunch in because you can't take it out once it's in there. So what I like to do is add a little bit, mix it up real good. Because we've got such a long working time, we don't have to be as worried about the clock, so to speak. But as you can tell, it darkened it a little bit, but not a lot. So I don't want a real dark green, but I do want a nice average green in there. So we're going to stir a little bit more and see if we like that color. Now I believe the mica was a generic apple green. It wasn't the actual apple green that I've bought in the past. It was something that I got from somebody that ordered it, I believe, through an overseas company. And so it was just a little bit lighter than what the normal apple green is. So this is the third time we've added green, and it is getting a little darker. Now what I like to do, I always like to add a little bit of yellow because I think that helps my green pop a little more. So we're going to get in here. The yellow, we can actually pour a little more in there. And if you drizzle it on top, it kind of allows you to see how much you're adding. But that will now change the green, I think, to more of a grass green. So I always add yellow to my orange and to my green because the green dye is really dark. Now as you mix that, if you feel like maybe there's too much yellow popping out at you, well, then add a little more green. So we'll do one more shade of green in there and see what we get. And I just swish it around like this to get it off the stick. Yeah, that's a nice green. I was going for that kind of a brighter grass green. So, alright, so now that we've got that mixed up, first thing I'm going to do is wipe my dye canisters off here, because if you don't, the dye will run down the bottle and it'll just make a mess on the shelf. So I always wipe them off. And then you just have to be careful where you set your rag so that you don't get everything covered in dye from your rag. Alright, so now you want to wipe off the drill bit. That way it's ready to go for the next job. If you were to forget to do that, not a big deal. You can just drop that in some acetone and it'll take care of it. But I usually try to wipe that off. Alright, so now I'm going to, because it's one color and I'm not trying to keep any color separation, I don't have to wait for this to get thick or worry about color separation with the epoxy. At this point, it's just going to be a green cast with some colored golf tees. So I can pour this at its thinnest state, which is right now, and not worry about what's going on. So the nice thing about it is, because I've got that mesh on it, pouring it when it's thin will allow it to soak through the mesh. You don't have to move it around the mold a lot because it's going to get in there and fill all them voids as it works its way up. But if you pour too fast, it will roll over the top of that mesh and down the side of your mold and make a huge mess for you to clean up later. And because this has such a long working time, if I felt like we didn't have enough resin mixed up, I would have plenty of time to add to this. But as you can, yep, there, I was close. As you can see, the resin's coming up. So I have a feeling this blank is going to be a little bit bigger than what was needed or wanted, but I'd rather give him something taller. He can always part it off or have plenty of room as he shapes this bowl to remove what he wants. So now I'm going to place this in a pressure pot, and unfortunately, because it's epoxy, it's going to have to go in there for about 2 to 3 days, and I'd rather err on the side of caution and put it in there longer. So that's what we're going to do. This is a pressure pot that I built. I use quite a few of these. Just hand tighten them. Close the valve. Add my air hose. And I always close the valve first so I don't flood it with air and blow air out of the mold. And then I slowly open the valve part way so I can control how fast the air goes in. And I'm going to put this in at about 50 pounds of pressure. Once I get my air in, I close the valve, release the air hose, so there's no risk of extra air going in that and it overinflating. And now I'm going to set that off to the side and I'm going to give it 3 days. Alright, it's been 3 days. Now it's time to open this. I've already drained the air. Here's our mold. Everything held up just like we wanted. Even our rubber bands survived. A lot of times they'll break on you in the process. So we'll open all this up. Everything stayed intact where we wanted it. Nothing leaked out through our glue line. This is all just what I spilled over the edge. So our 3D mold held up just fine. The problem with epoxy now is it needs another 5 to 7 days to fully cure. Because it's a slow cure resin, it'll need those extra days to reach its full hardness. Alright, so here's how I would remove this from my base. I'm just going to take a razor blade and cut into the glue. And then take a screwdriver and put in between the glue and the base and give it a pop. Because we put tape on this, it pops right off. As you can see, everything is pretty much how we wanted it. This is our block that we left inside for glue. We'll just pull the rest of this glue off the side. Now there's some epoxy resin in it, so it may be a little bit of a chore, but for the most part, we'll just score around the edge here and remove this. If you don't get resin in it, normally it pulls right off. So as far as our mold goes, I'm pretty confident we could use this again. In order to do that, what I'll do is score this, peel it off. Because it's cold now, we can demold this mold from the block. You wouldn't want to remove this to reuse it if your mold was still hot, because if the 3D print stays hot and you try to demold it, you're going to deform it. So now I'm going to take to the bandsaw and I'm going to cut an edge here. That will allow us to remove this mold from the side without damaging the cast inside. And then when we use it again, what we'll just do is tape it shut. So when you cut this groove, you don't want to cut into your resin. You just want to cut through this PLA print. And as you can see, because it has tape on it, it's peeling right off. Now if this weren't so deep, we would have probably been able to push it through the mold, but 5 inches is a pretty good depth to try to push resin through. So now next time we want to use that, we're just going to put a piece of clear tape over that seam, and our mold will be intact again, and we'll be able to reuse it. And for now, here's our bowl blank cast out of epoxy resin using a 3D printed mold. Now that we can 3D print our molds, coat them with tape, our opportunities are endless. Well, that's all there is to it. Pretty simple. Print the mold, coat it in clear tape, shipping tape, and then pour your resin. Whether it's urethanes, epoxies, it really doesn't matter. The main thing is make sure that your tape's thick enough to hold up to the heat of the resin. And there's no reason why you can't print your own molds to the size you need and save yourself a ton of money and actually reuse them by taping them seams shut. I hope you enjoyed the video and that it inspires you to get a little more creative. Please post any comments. I'd love to hear from you. Hey, if you like what you've seen, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos. I'm John. Thanks for joining.